And this time I was all the more disheartened because I had actually put in the hard work and I could not really get a result. So by the end of this, I thought this isn't really my cup of tea. Because I've never really had a challenge in the past to at least qualify an exam. But here I could see that I was actually, after spending in so many hours, I realized that the efforts were not being reciprocated into results.
Okay, we're live. Hey, Nisha, thank you so much for joining me on this debriefing session today. Congrats on the 730 score. How are you feeling?
I think it's a really great feeling, given that I've had such a long journey to get here. It finally feels like a big relief to have that one milestone covered, because I believe this is one of the most important aspects before actually starting with the whole application. So I think this is quite a relief to be done with GMAT, and to be done with GMAT with a good score. So it's a good feeling.
Yeah, I can totally relate. I mean, it took me about 5.5, 6 months and 2 failed attempts to get to a successful score, so I can totally relate to that. Why don't you take me to the very, very beginning of your journey? Like, how did you start prepping for the GMAT?
Right. So I think my journey for GMAT actually began about 3.5 years ago. So this is back in college. I was applying for the YLP program, and this is done. This is a program by ISP, and I wanted to apply for the program. So this was one of those exams which I thought was very easy to crack. So I did not really give myself some time to prep. I booked my date, went through the official guides and give my exam. And I don't think I remember, but I either got a 640 or a 650. I mean, one of the two scores. And I was quite disappointed with the score. I thought that I could have done really well. And this was an exam that I gave in a time span of about 30 days or even less. So I did not really go through the mocks. Just did the official guide and went ahead and gave the exam. And again, 15 days later, 20 days later, I booked another attempt. And I think I got a similar score. And this was actually a 10-point, and the score was actually 10 points lower than what I had scored the first time. So it was either a 630, 620. And and that's when I decided to not study for this exam, because I had like other things to take care of at that given point in time.
So what was that experience like? Because like you went in thinking that GMAT's really simple, and when you look at the OG questions, I totally agree. Like it seems very, very doable, right? And then you're getting a 640 and a 630. Like, what did that feel like?
So again, because I thought that this was an easy exam to crack, I did not really anticipate a score of a 630, 640. And to be very honest, I did not really even have a target in my head, but I just knew that 630, 640 was just not good enough. And that for me was really disappointing, because I have always been very decent with quant. And which is why I thought I only had to work on verbal, and that is what I had actually primarily focused on during my first prep. But I realized that the real GMAT is actually very different from the questions that we see in the official guide. So I think that was something that I did not really expect, and I was very disheartened by that exam, and which is why I decided that I would not be looking into GMAT for the next 1 year or so. And so that was my first first 2 attempts that I'd given, and this was like about 3 years back. And I think a year later, I'd started working. So I think a few months into it, I thought that this was the right time to go ahead and prep for my exam, because I mean, the work-life balance for me was really good at that given point in time. So that's when I started with my prep again. And this was, if I'm not wrong, this would be 2018. I got placed in 2017, 2018, and early 2019 is when I began with my next round of preparations, and this time I decided that I would not just do the OGs. I would opt in for like a proper coaching and then go through the whole process. So I ended up taking a face-to-face coaching class in Delhi. I'm
Right.
based out of New Delhi, so I ended up taking an actual live face-to-face class, and this was for about 3 months. And and then I think I gave my GMAT so I gave myself like 2 months of time after the classes got over to sink in all the content and then give my mocks and then go for my exam. And
So the
the
content that
approach.
you used to prep was what was available at these in-person classes. There was
Right.
nothing. Right. Got it.
Yeah. So these were all the materials that the coaching center had shared.
Sure.
And one of the key differences that I have seen, and again, I mean, just to reiterate, verbal for me was my weakest section because I was always a V48, 49 in my quant. But verbal, I think I had started with a V26, 27. Yeah, somewhere around that.
Got
And
it.
uh, and the approach that they had was a 2-3 split, and then just identifying the errors and eliminating options.
Sure.
So that was the sentence correction approach. But I mean, across sections, it was actually just identifying and eliminating options. So there was no sort of pre-thinking
Did you
approach.
find that worked for you, the splits approach? It's a very, very popular approach.
Yeah, I mean, it did work for me for the longest time while I was prepping. But when I had given my exam, I realized that I could not really split options anymore because,
Yeah.
and when I got my ESR later, it was all the meaning questions that I got incorrect. So the split mechanism actually doesn't work for those questions. And
I mean,
I
I've sort of experienced that on my GMAT also because especially over the past few years, SC has moved away from that split grammatical elimination to a more meaning-based elimination. And on my
right.
personal GMAT, I found out of 10 SC questions, about 7 of them were identical when it came to grammar. It was just the meaning was so different, and split just does not work for that.
True, and that's exactly the experience I had during my exam. So I was not really able to split options anymore, and the whole idea of taking the meaning based approach was the last option that I would have opted in for.
Sure.
So because I spent a lot of time, yeah. So I spent a lot of time on those questions, and then it would have been long enough for me to even take that approach. So I would just like end up selecting an option and moving on to the next question. And obviously that didn't work. So I ended up scoring a 660 in that one. So that was my main after preparation exam. So this was like the first exam where I really prepped for it. I think I put in like about 5 months on and off with work. So it wouldn't really be 5 months. But yeah, I mean, with work, I did spend about 5 months. Also because my coaching classes were weekend batches. So that took longer to finish. But yeah, so that was my attempt. And this time I was all the more disheartened because I had actually put in the hard work and I could not really get a result. So by the end of this, I thought this isn't really my cup of tea because I've never really had a challenge in the past to at least qualify an exam, or I'm not excelling all of the exams, but gracefully qualifying these exams. But here I could see that I was actually after spending in so many hours, I realized that the efforts were not being reciprocated into results, and that kind
of you're academically you're a very strong student, and it's just this one weird exam that you're not able to sort of outdo or outperform in. And it's a very disheartening experience.
Right. Yeah. So it kind of was. I actually began reconsidering my options here because I thought that I've given 3 attempts, no good output. Maybe this isn't something I can actually do. Maybe I should take a realistic approach and consider other options instead of wasting like more time into this exam. And uh, and so I'll jump to, so this is where I started evaluating other options. But I think a year later, so this is yeah, I would so this would be early 2019, mid 2019. So this journey
Sure.
began back in 2018 and 2019. So this was the time period. Um, and so early 2020, when the lockdown began and my CFA exams got cancelled, and so around May, I thought that maybe with the whole work from home experience, managing studies with work became very convenient, because I could manage my work and also my study. So I didn't really have to
Sure.
sit in office for a given number of hours, and I could utilize my time well. And because I did not have my other exam coming up, I thought that maybe I should try one last time and see how this works. So I'd gone through GMAT club. So this is back in May, I started reconsidering giving GMAT, but I effectively started prepping for it in October. So in between, it was just I got COVID, my family got COVID, so there was like an absolute break in terms of everything. Right. And so October is when I got myself effectively enrolled into GMAT, eGMAT. And how I actually came across this was I had one of my college senior who had used eGMAT, and he did really well. And then I came across a lot of success stories, and one of the key aspects, which was verbal for me, that was one thing that I wanted to really work upon. It seemed, and I could see through a lot of people, I spoke to a lot of people, I reached out to a lot of people over LinkedIn to understand how their experience had been, and some of them had like verbal as their weak area, so I could relate to the kind of experience they had in the past. And that's how I decided on this platform. And so in October, I started effectively studying for this, and then I gave my GMAT in December. So this was December last week when I gave my GMAT, and I got a 710 in that one. And surprisingly, my breakdown was a V40 and a Q48.
Oh, and one suffered.
Yeah, and for me, that jump from V28 to a V40 was a huge jump. And I mean,
how did you make that happen? Because did you just like go through the entire course in a very structured format? Did you pick and choose some concepts to study? How did you study using eGMAT?
So I religiously followed the whole platform curriculum that eGMAT had. So I started off with sentence correction, went on with CRRC. I'd gone through actually all of the course material. And then I did those practice tests in the manner that was specified by the team. And surprisingly, while I was giving those tests, there was a V curve in terms of my performance. So I started off with an accuracy of about 70%, 75%. It dipped to about 65% through my prep, and then it eventually jumped on to 80-90%. And what I realized was, so I'd reached out to the team when there was a dip in terms of my overall accuracy. And I asked them, what is it that I'm missing, or what is it that I should be keeping in mind? And
did you talk to anyone like in specific, like anyone in particular help you?
No, so I'd reached out, I'd written to the team, and one of them responded during that. And they helped me understand that maybe you should look into the areas and keep an error log. I looked into the areas where I was faltering, and turned out that there was specific kind of questions that I was getting wrong. And those could be specific grammar structure that I was getting wrong, or maybe specific strengthen type questions that I was getting wrong. And so then I started evaluating each of the questions very critically in terms of, even if I had those answers right, whether my understanding of how I attempted the question and the kind of summary that the EGMAT had provided, did it align, did it not, why did it not align, and all of those aspects. So I started maintaining a proper error log wherein I would uh, mention all the mistakes that I had made, but also all the learning points that I had in the questions that I'd attempted correctly. So I think that really worked for me, because then that jump to a 90% accuracy was really real quick. I had gone through all my all the past practice test, and then I started giving on my next set of tests. So I could see that improvement, and then yeah. So I think this is how my preparation. This is how I'd actually moved on with my preparation for that 710 score. I gave my GMAT on December 28th, and just to to see the 700 number, the digit 7 on the hundredths place, I think that was kind of overwhelming, especially because I hadn't really expected much from this exam, and I honestly did not think that I would have been able to do that in any other.
Especially you spent like 5 months previously and got a 20-point improvement, and now you're putting in 3 months the right way, the most structured way, and your score has jumped like 50 points.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I looked at my verbal score, and that was very surprising for me, because in terms of my, even for RC, and I mean, let me just take a step back. So when I'd given my exam, I still got my ESR, and when I looked at it, I realized that my accuracy for RC and SC was really high. It was about 90. I was a 98th percentile or 99th percentile on my RC and SC, and so I mean, CR was not as great. But I realized why that had happened. I was running short on time, and I decided that I would not cut down on my time for RC no matter what. So I started skipping or not paying as much time, not giving as much time to the CR questions. But that was a choice that I made during the exam, so I could understand that this wasn't really my weak area, but I knew that I'd made that call during the course of the exam to effectively complete the section in time and not hamper my RC at all. So
is this something that you discovered on your own, or someone else helped you discover this in the ESR?
No, so I got my ESR, and there was a coincidence during that time. So I reached out to EGMAT to thank them for the score that I'd gotten. But around that time, Ashutosh reached out to me, and these were like two parallel chains of emails that were running through the system. So I just wrote to the support team thanking them, and he had reached out to me for the last their program, which is the Last Mile Push, and. He was unaware of the fact that I'd given my exam, and I was under the impression that he's reached out because of my exam results. And so when we connected over a call, I told him that I had given the exam and this is what I got. And he was surprised because he had reached out to me based on my performance, my past performance on the EGMAT portal. And I told him that this is what the breakdown is, this is what it is. But I'm very happy with my score irrespective, because this wasn't something I had expected. And he said that give yourself a month more, work with me for a month, and we'll see how this goes. So until then, I had not really thought of giving my exam again. I was considering, but I wasn't very sure of giving my exam again. So, which is... I spoke to him, and then I gave myself some time to think this through, because I wasn't very confident of myself in excelling the exam. I thought that I've hit my potential of a 710, and I think I'm really happy with it. And maybe this is good. And so, yeah, I wasn't really reconsidering it. But then I spoke to him, and I connected to him a couple of times before actually making up my mind to be giving this exam. And then we started working together on this one. He would share like a defined plan with me in terms of what needs to be done in terms of both quant and verbal. And I used to religiously follow it. Even on days I had like a hectic work schedule, I would extend my study and not miss anything. So I would just be on time in terms of the schedule. And yeah, so I think I gave myself about 30-35 days, because
Sure.
I effectively started studying in the first week of January. I gave my exam around mid-Feb, but there was like a lag of 10 days because I couldn't get a slot in any of the centers. So, but I was all ready to give my exam by first week of Feb. So the last 2 weeks was basically just staying in touch with all the material that I'd worked on, and all the course material, error logs, and all of those things, just to stay in touch and not lose out of all of these notes, and just keep practicing on a regular basis. But it wasn't any new learning. It was just
Yeah.
revising the old content before the exam. And yeah, so that was like an effective
Did
1 month
Ashutosh
sort of
help with that period also? Did you go to him for advice about like how to keep in touch with the material?
Yeah, so I spoke to him once when I booked my date, and so there was like a 10 days lag, right, between
Yeah.
my attempts, and I was booking my center, the exams were getting cancelled. So that happened twice before I finally gave my exam. So I got in touch with him once, and he told me that this is the approach that you need to take. You've already done the course, and you just have to stay in touch, just revise things regularly, and you're good to go. So that's what I did. I didn't really think that I needed to pester him anymore for that. So the last couple of days, it was fairly simple in terms of what I had to do. And yeah, and then I ended up giving my next attempt, wherein I got a 730. So about 40 days of preparation for that one, and about 5-6 months of the first preparation, and then a 3 months. So yeah, that's been a long journey, but I think 1 month of hard work and the effort gave me the output. I think it took me like about 3 months to do that myself, and like a lot longer earlier.
Yeah, I mean, especially the last push from 7:10 to 7:30, where it's very hard to sort of gear up because you've got a good score, you just want to relax. You're finally done with something you've been studying for like 3 years, right? And
Right.
just gearing
Yeah.
up for the one final push and your partnership with Ashutosh. I mean, the difference between 7:30 and 7:10 is like the difference between an admit plus scholarship and just an admit. Right, those 20
Right.
points
Yeah.
do matter when it comes to stuff like scholarship. So I think like that's a fantastic story. Let's switch gears a little bit and discuss your MBA aspirations now. You've got the score. What schools are you looking at?
Yeah, and in terms of the schools, I don't have my head set into the schools that I want to target.
Mhm.
I mean, just to give more context, because all throughout I'd just been prepping for GMAT, so I could not really see anything outside of GMAT or anything beyond GMAT.
Sure.
For me, I know how this is supposed to be. The next steps
Mhm.
is supposed to look like, but I don't really have my schools laid out, or in terms of what is it that I'm looking for in these schools, and how should I go about shortlisting these schools. So that path is kind of unclear to me at this point in time. And because I do have time left before I actually begin working for my applications,
Sure.
I think that this would be the right time to get into those details, speak to more people, and understand more about how we should go ahead with shortlisting schools in the first place.
Right. So there's two things that you can do to have a brief understanding of what schools target. First thing is just compare your GMAT score with the median scores at every school. And if you do that, you would know that you can pretty much apply to any top 20 school in the US, right? Okay, take a step back. Do you have geographical preferences? Do you want to apply to European schools, stuff like that?
So I was inclined towards European school,
Okay,
also because of my interest in finance, and I believe that the European schools are much known for the financial side of it. But yeah, so my initial inclination is towards European school, but none of that is set in stone. I'm still sort of figuring things out and understanding uh,
So when you
those
say
details.
Europe, you referring to the English schools? Yeah,
Yeah.
because the other European schools, finance, I'm not as sure, like HEC or NCR or some of the other schools. So the London Business School and Oxford and Cambridge could be, but then you've also got Columbia, you've also got NYU Stern, Wharton, Chicago Booth, all of these schools in the US that are amazing finance oriented schools. I wouldn't rule those out either.
Okay.
It's just that compare your median your GMAT score to the median GMAT score at the schools you want to apply to, and see what sort of buffer you have for
Okay.
Wharton and Booth. I think the scores would be pretty like neck and neck. I think the median score would be around 730-ish. For Columbia also, I think 730-ish. For Stern, I would think it's about 710, 720. So you're definitely in that range for those schools. And European schools typically have lower median GMAT. So if I remember correctly, the median GMAT at Oxford was around 700. So from a GMAT point of view, you're golden. You can apply to any of these schools, right?
Okay.
So the next thing I would look at is post MBA careers. So you're
Right.
looking at finance. Are you looking to go in any specific area in finance?
Yeah, so it isn't just finance. I mean, my current areas of interest actually lie in private equity space or the
Mhm.
consulting side of it. So currently, I work with a lot of private equity firms,
Mhm.
but that's an indirect relationship because I work for a management consulting firm, but we do have a way of working through these private equity firms. So my post MBA ideal job would either be in the private equity space or in the strategic consulting side of it.
So here's where I'm just going to be as honest as possible, and this may be like bad news, but private equity is extremely hard to break into
Okay.
for people who have pre-MBA private equity experience.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, so out of let's say 300 people in the class, you would only maybe have one or two or three get into private equity, right?
Okay.
And then these are people who typically have experiences, pre-MBA experiences in PE. The goal to the road to PE rather is through investment banking. So you can recruit for IB, spend a couple of years in IB, and then apply to PE firms post that. So you can look at firms, or you can look at schools rather that have strong placements in investment banking. Work for that investment bank for a couple of years, then get into VC or PE later on, right?
Okay.
So immediately, if you want to use MBA as an immediate transition into PE, not going to happen, right?
Okay.
Because you don't have a pre-MBA background in PE,
Right.
and that's extremely important. And I'm
Okay.
really like I strongly discourage from taking this angle in your MBA essays. I strongly discourage saying that I want to work in PE in the midterm and something else in the long term, because that makes you a risk. If you're going to be recruiting for PE and if you're not going to look at other viable career options, you may not have a job post MBA, and schools
Right.
don't want that. So your application may get rejected. Does
Right.
that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, that does.
Yeah. So if you're really hard set on PE, then I would definitely look at investment banking in the midterm and PE in the long term, right? That's a viable option. What's more workable is strategic consulting. I think that's well within your wheelhouse. That's
Right.
something you've got a very easy, logical story to tell there, right? So
Right.
strategy
Yeah.
consulting um, is sort of big across the top 20 US schools in the US. Like you
Okay.
don't really have specific schools that are known for strategy consulting. It's like pretty much any top 20 school will get you to McKinsey or Bain or BCG, right? However, McKinsey, Bain, and BCG hire heavily from the top 10, less heavily from the top 15, and they do hire from the top 20 schools, but the odd student, like you would get maybe 7 or 8 people in a class going into McKinsey, Bain, and BCG from a top 20 school, as opposed to like an M7 school where about 30 students go to these top management incentive firms, right? So the higher you are when it comes to ranking, the better it is for you when it comes to strategy consulting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. That does.
Yeah. So lock in your goals would be my first recommendation. If it's strategy consulting, I think that's a much easier, clear, simpler story to tell. If strategy consulting is your goal, look at which school has the best track record of placing its students into the MBB firms, and select your schools accordingly. So your school selection needs to have a very close alignment with your career plan, right? Second to that is values and fit and all that stuff, right? You should feel sort of one with the school culture and all of that jazz that schools ask for on their essays. But what they're looking for is this person employable post MBA?
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So yeah. So I would definitely take in the goals related angle and the GMAT angle, and then use that to narrow down your schools. And yeah, do you have any sort of safety schools in mind? Any target schools? Anything in mind yet?
No. To be very honest, no, because again, like the approach that you were just talking about. I haven't actually gone through the whole process of shortlisting my schools
Sure.
at all. Like I'm aware of the schools and I'm aware of the kind of programs, and I've started speaking to a few people across different schools, but I haven't really sat down and penned the schools that I should be targeting, or the schools that I can easily get through, and the ones that those would be like the dream ones, the dream colleges for me. So I haven't really gone through that process yet.
So here's another thing you can do, right? You can leverage LinkedIn, and LinkedIn search gives you an option to search by people that went to a particular school, right? So in that field, you can, let's say, look for people who went to Columbia Business School, and in the employer field, you can put something like McKinsey, right? And see how many results pop up. And you can contrast that with, let's say, NYU, and then to run the same search, see how many results pop up, right? And that's how you can understand which schools typically feed into these MPB firms where you want to go, and apply to the schools that obviously have a better track record.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you have like an application strategy? Are you planning on applying to all these schools in round one, or spread out your applications across multiple rounds?
No, again, I might sound a bit clueless on these fronts, but this is something I thought that talking to you about these things would be like the right platform to just give me a head start on how this flows, and should I be applying to all schools in round one, or what should my overall strategy be in terms of going ahead with the application process?
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of spreading out your applications, and the way I would recommend that is when you narrow down on your school selection, right? You want to have like 2 dream schools, 2 target schools, and 2 safety schools. So have an even spread. And in your first round, I would recommend selecting your 2 dream schools and your safety school. Okay. So let's just put like names here. So let's say you're applying to Columbia and Booth as your dream schools, right? I would apply to those schools in round one, and I would have something like you want to go into finance, right? Which is a good finance safety school. Let's say Emory. You have Emory as a safety school, right? So you apply to Columbia, you apply to Booth, and you apply to Emory in round one. Based on your success in round one, based on which school gives you actually an interview offers, you will decide your round 2 strategy. So let's say you get rejected by Booth and Columbia straight away. You don't even get interviews. Let's say you just get rejected straight away. But Emory calls you for an interview, and Emory gives you an invite, and Emory gives you an admit, hopefully with some scholarship, right? So the results of round 1 tell you that the top 5 schools in the world maybe are not so hot on my profile. So in round 2, I don't want to apply to Wharton. I'm not going to apply to let's say Oxford or LBS. Oxford is a bad example. Let's say I'm not going to apply to LBS, right? But Emory gave me a scholarship. So top 25 schools give me a scholarship. Top 5 schools rejected me without, even an interview. So maybe the top 10, top 15 bracket is workable. That's realistic for me. Okay. So you take feedback from your first round of application, and in your next round, you maybe apply to NYU, which is a top 15 school, right? You maybe apply to Yale, which is a top 15 school, right? These are schools you may not have thought of previously because you just like no clue, right? But based on your feedback from your round 1, you can devise the strategy for round 2 and build your applications accordingly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. I think this is really helpful just to have some sort of background knowledge to understand how and in what direction should I be going into.
Yeah, like the flip side of that is if you get interview calls from Chicago and Columbia in round 1, right, and you maybe hopefully get admits from one of those schools, you know that the top of the top schools in the world are sort of positive about your profile. So in round 2, you'll apply to Wharton, you'll apply to LBS, you'll apply to INSEAD, you'll apply to like schools that are equal or higher than the schools that gave you the admits, right?
Right.
So yeah, you'll be more aggressive in round 2. If you get rejections in round 1, you'll be safer. So based on round 1, you'll play your round 2 accordingly.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? I'm happy to help.
I don't think so. My 2 primary questions were about how should I go ahead with shortlisting colleges, and then about the overall application strategy. And I think that you've answered both of those questions.
Yeah, awesome. I had fun talking to you, Nisha. If you have any other questions, please feel free to email me. And I hope this was productive. It was very fun for me.
Yeah, I think this is really, really helpful to actually just get started on that path. This is like going to be another sort of long journey, but yeah, I think this is really exciting, and it was really nice talking to you today.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for jumping on a call, and good luck for your applications. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.